Hi, it's Martin from the Accelerator team. I'm here with Keith Newman from Highlights PR. Hi Keith, how are you
Hello
doing?
there, hiya Martin.
We're going to talk about public relations today, PR, public relations. Keith, there's no such thing as bad PR, is there?
Well, it depends on who you are, but yes, it's really good if you can get into the media for whatever reason. The difference is if you've done something wrong, you need to know how to manage that and be able to get the right response so that you don't come out looking bad.
Right, okay, well, we've gone straight in. What do you do first of all, Keith? So, you know, why would I be interviewing you about PR?
Well, the thing is, with crisis management, I work with a lot of companies where things can potentially go wrong. And you have to be prepared for the worst. So what I do is I prepare statements for any eventuality that might come along. So if something does happen, you've got that straight away. And I can manage that so that the business can actually go ahead and try and put things right in the background.
So if you were acting for a large food chain, you would have a bunch of stuff ready to go out. Small businesses take a view on what could go wrong and what you might need to cover.
Well, even with
and the idea is then you've got the Chronicle ringing up saying, who do we speak to about this thing that happened?
Yeah. They speak to me as the spokesperson.
Yeah.
But more and more...
So most people wouldn't think that was PR. Most people would think, well, that's, you know, something like speak to the lawyers kind of thing, isn't it?
It's defending your reputation.
Yeah.
Or if you can't do that, it's keeping the status quo so that things don't get worse by saying the wrong thing at the wrong time.
Of course, yeah. So right, okay then. So we've gone straight into the crisis side there, but PR can be a good thing.
It is.
And you don't have to wait till you you know, you've poisoned someone to get in the papers, do you?
Yeah, I've got to say that
there are good ways into the papers, aren't there? So let's try and do a lot of the positive stuff. So you know, why would a business need to consider PR? How do they make the most of it? What kind of stuff is attracted to, you know, the press?
Well, it's like everything, isn't it? If people know you're there and they like what you're doing, you've got more chance of getting sales from them. And that's what it's about, really. It's about enhancing your reputation, letting people know you're there, and showing them what you've actually got. Now, the way I do that isn't by, here's a company who, let's say, makes widgets. What I do is, I wouldn't write a story about the widgets unless it's something new, technology,
particularly innovative widget, or it's
which we could.
But the Queen's using it or something. But
But it's more the style I use is the person behind the company, so they may have some sort of background or story that people want to read about. Because the way I gauge it is, if I pick a paper, open a newspaper, and there's a story there about, just say, a product, you think, that's a bit boring. But if there's something there about the person behind it, it immediately becomes much more interesting.
So this could be quite deep then, because Simon Sinek in Start With Why talks about how people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it.
Yeah.
So there could be 10 people making beds, but if the reason you make a bed and the way you make it is driven by a reason, or the place you make it in, or there's a reason more than just a bed.
I'll give you an example. A few months ago, I wrote a story. A lady came to me and said, I've got a website which is all about being accessible for people with autism.
Right.
So, nice story, good cause. But when I started interviewing her and I said, why are you doing this? We found out that a child was autistic, which again is an interesting thing. But when she took the child...
It sounds awful saying it, but that's not news, is it?
No, it's not news, not at all.
Charity helps people, autistic child.
But when
I sound callous, but that's not a story, is it?
But when she went to get the tests for her child, she realised that she was autistic as well at 39-year-old.
Wow.
And that's your story. So it was the woman who had went all the way through her life wondering why she did things in a particular way.
Battling against it.
Exactly. And then it was only when she had a child and got the child tested that she realised, and it becomes full circle. And that story got in the newspapers.
She might never have told. She could have just rang someone up and went, "Oh, I'm starting a charity."
Yeah.
Oh, great, well done.
Yeah. And that's what I think puts me aside from everybody else. I dig deep to find the story that's there. Now, obviously, some people don't want to be that open, and we'll find a different angle.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, you might.
But that's the way I do it. I look to see really what the story is.
Do you find then, Keith, that everyone does everyone have a story?
Everyone has a story.
Because not everyone realised they were autistic at 39, so started a charity. Like, it could be something a lot more mundane. Someone might have a cake shop And I suppose it could be, the secret recipe was their grannies who she got off a Frenchman in the war, something like that.
It makes a nice story because, particularly with local BBC radio, they love stories like that. They love stories about people who've done something a bit quirky or they've fought.
We've got a lot of quirky people in the North after all, haven't we?
It's a great place, though, isn't it? It's a great place. I mean, what makes a good PR story? You see a lot in the business newspapers about new appointments. I've just done one for a really good renewable business in Washington who've just appointed a new director. But it would have been easy for me to say to them, let's do the story about you appointing the director. But I looked again at what else they've done, and they've just been appointed to fit solar panels on some of the region's most iconic buildings.
Right.
One of which is the Theatre Royal. So we put the new director on top of the Theatre Royal for a photograph with the new solar panels, and it makes a much more interesting story.
So that's interesting. So what you've done there then, Keith, is you've linked into my next question, which was going to be, what makes PR different from just advertising?
Yeah.
Because that solar panel company may just go, well, we'll just put an advert in the bottom of the corner of the journal or on a website. Oh well, we do solar panels.
Yeah.
But you've taken an appointment story with presumably a high value contract of the kind of work they would love more of.
Exactly.
And you've linked both together and turned it into a story, and you've got like the third party credibility that the paper thought it was worth printing, so these guys must. You've linked a whole load of different things in there, haven't you?
The thing is, you can tell the difference between advert and an editorial piece.
And an advertorial is just a written
totally
advert to look like press, isn't it?
And you can tell a mile off. And the public aren't stupid. They know you've paid for that.
Yeah.
But it gives you much more credibility if you get into the newspapers or radio or TV because of the story rather than the advert.
So, you mentioned before about the lady who discovered she had autism. That was quite a personal thing. There's probably people out there sitting well, I bet if I chatted with Keith, you would never find a story about me. I'm not special. I like me widgets. I think they're great, but you'll never find one. I mean, have you got an example of something where it's been a real challenge to try and dig something out?
I have.
Where you've had to have a couple of goes and go, just we'll get there, but
only once, and we did it in the end, and it became one of the biggest stories I've ever done.
Right.
A photographer. The story was, I've moved out of my bedroom into an office in Sunderland. Can you do a press release about this? He's a wedding photographer, and I thought, that's not a story.
So this has gone from hobby, casual business to now I'm professional.
Yeah.
It's which again, it's just business
not the
expansion.
Thing that you can open the paper and see that.
Because every startup goes through an expansion stage.
Exactly.
That isn't a story, is it?
So I spoke to him, and we actually sat on this boat in this very spot, and we worked out whether he'd done any unusual weddings or unusual venues, and they were very much mainstream. Lovely lad, but I just couldn't find that thing. And at the end I said, I've got one more question for you, because I am at the end of my tether now, and I'll always say, if I can't find the story, I won't take your money, because that's not fair. Because yes, I could have wrote the story about him being a photographer setting up, but it's not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
So it's my reputation as well as his. And I said, what's your hobbies? And he went, oh well, I'm working on a DVD that's going to Cannes Film Festival about zombie brides. And I went, hang on, you're doing a horror film about brides. You're a wedding photographer by day.
You never thought to mention that.
You're a zombie photographer by night. And it just went great. You can
imagine the picture all of a sudden.
Well, the pictures are really important.
Well, I was going to come on to that, so don't spoil that, unless this is where we're going to talk about it.
I think it probably is, because the photograph, he wanted to let people know he was from Sunderland. So we stood on the cliffs at Sunderland overlooking the piers.
Yeah.
We got him in his wedding three-piece suit with his camera, because it's always important to get that in. And then we got 3 models dressed as zombie brides and bridesmaids. And that photograph and that story went everywhere. Not only local BBC, Sky, it went to the newspapers, but it went to specialist magazines as well, about movies, about photography. And
it ticks all the boxes, doesn't it? Zombies, weddings, brides, models.
Yeah. But
tech,
that was
camera.
the closest I'd ever been, and yet it became one of the best stories.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
That's quite interesting. So yeah, because again, the second part of the story, if you say the story's got three things, it's normally got a photo, the headline, and the story.
Yeah.
The first two, the story, the headline and the picture are what determine whether someone's going to read the story, presumably.
Well, yes, and I always try to come up with a good headline, but I guarantee that if nothing else has changed in the editorial, the headline will, because the journalists, they have their own slant on the headlines.
Ah, right. So you might send the story off with, zombie brides. They'll then go, well, we know what gets clicks at our end.
Yeah.
We know what sells. So they might have input in that.
Yeah.
But again, you've got to give them something to work with.
Yeah. When I started this business, well, when I started the business 15 years ago, but when I got the boat 8 years ago and it became my office, I came up with a headline for myself: PR firm floats in the city. And that they actually kept that headline, which I was really pleased at.
Go on in. I like that, floats in the city. So actually, yeah, I mean, I don't know how this is sounding because we're not expert sound engineers, but hopefully you're picking this up. But yeah, we're sitting literally on your office, aren't we?
Yes.
And again, you've been, I mean, this isn't a shameless plug for you, but obviously you use these things to help plug yourself, don't you? So, because you've been in the top 10 coolest offices in Newcastle, haven't you?
Yeah.
And we're sitting in, surely, which most people can agree is one of the cool. We'll slice some pictures in here of the place around it, but we're sitting in a pretty cool place, aren't we?
I'm very lucky that I have the boat. She's called Highlights, the same as the business. She's regularly seen all up and down the river, and it's a good advertisement for my business. But it's a great place to meet, and it's a great place to work because it's lovely and quiet. It's peaceful. If it rains, you've got the cover. You just, if it's sunny, all the windows are open, and it's a good place for my own well-being as well as my clients. And of course, my clients love the odd trip up and down the river as well.
And I'm sure they love coming here for meetings. It's quirky. It's a little bit strange, So James, our producer on these, he's like, "Oh, this is great!" Like really excited. But also it's again, I think. Probably a while ago, but you were also, like one of the most influential Twitter users, and so again, you can't just pump any old crap out to like get people to like follow you, retweet you, to be seen as an influencer. Because PR and this whole modern trend of like influencer, that's what PR's been doing for years, isn't it? Influencing people's buying decisions.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the whole top and bottom of it. It makes people come to that business. And it's not just about sales either. It's about enhancing reputation. It's about reinforcing your brand. It's everything really. Yeah. But there is a limit as well, because sometimes you see PR companies, we'll do a story for you every 3 weeks, every 4 weeks. Sometimes it's too much.
There might not be a story.
Exactly, and that goes back to, I won't do a story unless there's a story there. Because yes,
you can't make there be a story, can you?
Well, you can, but it always comes across.
It'll
as
feel like you've forced it out rather than.
And our colleagues in the media will say, "Oh, there's another one from that business," and they'll get fed up. You know, unless you're some big, and I have got some big businesses where they ask us to do a story every month.
And there's a lot happening.
But there's a lot happening.
Yeah.
And one
if we're sitting in the shadow of the sage here. I wish there was more shadow because we're probably washed out here. It'd look like we're hiding from the police here, Keith. We'll be like blacked out. But if you're like the sage, they're in all the time. But they've got exciting stuff happening all the time.
Well, that's right. Yeah. And like there's some of my businesses and organisations where they're doing something every month. So there may be a charity story they're doing, or it might be a new sort of premises that they're moving on, or they're taking on a new contract,
or a new ambassador, celebrity ambassador, or I don't know.
But small, medium enterprise. I would say probably 3 to 4 times a year is more than enough. Yeah. That gives you time to build up. Like I work with the People's Kitchen. I work with a lot of charities, and they've got things going on all the time. So that's great, because there's always something happening.
And to be honest, People's Kitchen at the minute, obviously there's a heat versus eat. There's a cost of living crisis. When there isn't a cost of living crisis, there's a businesses are doing more to help people who aren't riding the wave as them. You can you can come up with why people should support the People's Kitchen in any weather, can't you?
Well, I've just done a huge campaign with North Tyneside Business Forum about the effect on small businesses of this, and we've had, I think, 3 television companies involved, radio, newspapers, and whilst it's not going to help the businesses, it highlights those businesses' plights, and it might just make the public think, let's go and support them a bit more.
The next interesting difference, I think, between an advert and PR, or it feels like, you tell me if I'm wrong, is that a PR story for your zombie photographer probably saw him get a surge of queries. But actually, he wasn't necessarily selling his services. It wasn't a 20% DFS advert.
People say to me sometimes, new people to PR, when I write the press release, they'll say, "But you haven't got my website on it," and that's not what it's about.
People will find
the
you.
Newspapers won't print your website unless it's a thing like the People's Kitchen where it's donate here.
Yes,
you know? But they won't do it. So why put it on? It just annoys the journalists when you do things like that.
When you try and sneak it in, come on, Keith, you know better than that.
You can put it on, like for example, when I put a story on my own website for my clients, I can put it on then, and they're going to get that extra hit. But as soon as you send it to the media, they're not going to do it, because they could easily say, well, that turns into an advert now.
Yeah. But the point is, though, so your zombie guy probably did get a surge.
He got a huge amount.
But some people might just get awareness. That doesn't necessarily turn into a direct hit.
Exactly.
And awareness is part of the reason why you need to be out there, isn't it? People need to know who you are.
If I get someone into a newspaper and they publish it in the online version or something like Big Daily, when you do a Google search on that company, it comes straight at the top.
Yeah.
And it gives that credibility as well. So somebody searching for that company and gets a press thing at the top is going to read that and think, I like that company, or they've done well, or they're the type of people I can trust and get on with.
Yeah. I mean, we met many years ago through B&I, which we're not here to talk about B&I, but in B&I they have this thing called VCP, visibility, credibility, profitability. And before that, there's invisibility. You can sell the best cakes in the world, but if no one knows where your shop is, what you know, you'll have a little local spread. But you've got to become visible to a wider market, which is just part of that, isn't it? And then the credibility comes from the third party. Oh, well, they've been in the Chronicle a couple of times, and they were on ITV, and there's another couple of websites they've been mentioned on. Couple that with good reviews on your Facebook, your Google, and all of a sudden you're starting to build it's an overall presence, isn't it?
And you add social media to that.
Yeah.
The amount of people, when I'm monitoring my clients' Facebook pages, for example, when they've been on TV or on radio, and the amount of good things people say, oh, you are great, you're fantastic, it was lovely hearing about your business.
I saw you on the telly the other day.
Yeah, and I get a buzz from that, because I know that my clients are getting a bigger buzz because people have seen them on the TV.
Because also the way social media works now, if you can generate any interest at all, you know, we accidentally trip over good stories on our social media pages, and you see the activity peaks, and you think, and it's not, to be honest, for us, believe it or not, accountancy isn't that exciting to most people. But we know, for instance, on Facebook, people love to see personal stories. They love it if someone's doing a charity bike ride, or we're doing a new team photo, or I don't know, we're doing stuff like that. People love that kind of stuff. They don't look at a Facebook page because they want to know about forecasting or tax. Heaven forbid, my specialist topic. But
that's exactly what it is.
So because again, this PR, is that why it's so important to go behind the widget into the person, and again, it's the why their widget. Oh well, they're a local business, they're an ex-veteran, they're a whatever. Oh well, that's a reason to buy theirs.
Exactly.
Is it because people, are you tapping into the fact that people buy with their mind? Because you could buy a cake from anywhere. There's hundreds of photographers. There's hundreds of widgets. People need a reason to pick theirs, don't they?
I think it's simpler than that. I think it's just if you can connect with someone, you're more likely to buy. So reading a story about somebody and thinking, what a lovely thing they've done, or I can relate to them because I've got a similar problem, or I've went through the same sort of thing. It gives you that empathy with them, and that's probably why people buy from people. Because if you had to choose from 3 people who are supplying carpets, and you've just read a story about a guy who set up a carpet company and then employed his 2 sons who were also carpet fitters, and then appointed an apprentice, and you know, you're probably much more likely to buy from them than anybody else.
Keith's laughing because I'm standing on his foot, because he keeps tapping his foot and probably wobbling the camera.
I know, you wouldn't believe I do.
We're not.
I do media training as well. That's one of the things.
I know you did, because I remember years ago. Can you remember we went up to
we went up this Hollywood Special School in Morpeth, didn't we?
And we did it with Sue Sweeney.
Sue
Can you remember?
Sweeney,
And there was a lad from our office. And you remember what she asked him? You won't remember this, but I don't know if we can tag Andrew Bonney, who used to work in our place. And we turned up and we'd done all this, like, oh, well, you might get asked this. And Andrew was a good-looking lad, to be fair. And Sue Sweeney's first question was, well, my next guest here, you know, when I say accountancy on a Sunday morning, you're probably thinking, no, not. But man, if you could see this lad, what a specimen. Something like that, I'm paraphrasing. But fair play to Andrew, like, because he just had a bit of training. He didn't miss a beat, he didn't. But that was good fun, actually.
Yeah, I love doing media training. I really do,
actually.
Because people think, oh no, it's going to be so scary. It's not. It can be scary when it's real.
Yeah.
But if you've done it beforehand, it makes it a lot better. You know, I do a lot of crisis management, we mentioned before, and sometimes I do have to go on TV and be the spokesperson and keep the straight face and toe the party line. And it can be scary, but when you've done it and you think, not only have I done well for me, I've done well for that client. You know. And
let's talk about that crisis management a bit then, Keith, because there is the old saying, there's no such thing as bad PR. It's all awareness. People will remember the name, they might not know why, but you don't want to be in the paper because you get repeatedly poisoning people if your widgets keep chopping people's fingers off or whatever. You know, so. You know, I mean, most businesses will probably have a disaster recovery plan for if their shop burns down, they're insured. If they lose all the data, they've hopefully got a backdoor. There's that kind of stuff. But there's certain kind of businesses and sectors presumably should, like, probably spend a bit of time being ready in case something terrible happens.
They need to work out what could go wrong in their business. Now, things like natural disasters and stuff, well, you know, you cannot account for that, but things like you just said, data going down, poisonings, you know, a sudden death, especially in companies who you know, look after people and things like that, care homes, etc., where it's not the norm. So they should really have a few scenarios, and I can help them to write those statements so when things go wrong, it saves time. Time is of the essence, because there's nothing worse than the phone ringing and it's Time Tees or the BBC saying, tell me now.
Aye, if your shop's just been closed because you've been linked to a salmonella outbreak or an E. coli outbreak, the last thing you want to do is think, what the hell am I going to tell the papers?
Exactly.
So if you've just got something ready to go. Now, people might think, but what's the chances of that happening? It doesn't have to be elaborate, presumably.
No,
it just needs to be something, doesn't it?
It doesn't have to be dramatic either, like, in that sense. I work a lot with charities, and sometimes charities have volunteers, and sometimes you don't know the backgrounds of those volunteers, and something could crop up about that person that is going to ruin the reputation of that charity. So again, I have to react very fast if I get a phone call. They'll say, what do we do? And I'll say, right, you work out what you're going to do with the HR or your people who look after that. I'm going to write a statement. It'll be with you in half an hour. You approve it, and then if the newspapers get a hold of it, we've got something. And that can change all the time as information comes about. And sometimes the best crisis management is to say nothing, or say nothing in a clever way where you say something but you say nothing. It's easier done. Well, it's easier said than done, I think. There is an art to it.
Okay then. Right, okay. So Keith, what one thing we normally try and ask people as we start to wrap these up is, what's the... Actually, I'll come back to that because what we haven't touched on yet is a lot of what we've talked about is getting on into what you could call the old stream, old style press. Getting into the papers, websites of papers, possibly on, North East News or whatever, or your local, largely. Does most of this just translate just as easily to social media then? Because most people now are presumably would class themselves as doing their own PR every other day when they're doing their social media posts. Are there lessons to be learned there about the type of posts, the type of...
It's the same sort of thing, I suppose. If you make it engaging and interesting for people to read, your social media can be as interesting as your PR. One of the main social media things I do is a newsletter, and that incorporates a lot of the stories that I've done for my clients, so it gives my clients another hit, basically, when I send it to 3,000 on my list. So I do a magazine every 2-3 months, a newsletter.
Yes, and I presume your autistic charity,
your
zombie brides, they were all in there whenever they were in there. Which actually is a great bit of advertising for you as well, isn't it? I got this photographer all over the place.
And people hopefully share and say, Keith did that for us from Highlights PR. You know, that's the whole thing.
So one thing we're trying kind of end on then is what's the thing that businesses get most wrong about PR?
Right. I'll tell you what I can guarantee first. I can guarantee you finding a good story and writing a good story, getting professional photography, and I've got good contacts to get it out there. So if you reverse that, that's what they get wrong. A lot of people think they can write, and I've seen businesses send me press releases, fantastic, but they're not in the right style for newspapers or media. So it's about knowing the styles of the newspapers. So read lots of newspapers. I know it sounds stupid, but I read every Northeast newspaper every day. Of course, I'm looking for my clippings, but I also look at the other things as well.
Because if you know the kind of stuff that the editor is allowing in, it's easier to imitate, isn't it?
It is.
Because you're never going to change them to your way, are you?
No, well, if you do it in the style that they like,
it's less work.
Hopefully they copy and paste it and put it in, and that's great. So that's the first thing. It's all about having the style right. Photography, I could go on all day about photography. It's one of my pet hates. Some of the photographs that...
You hate photographers?
No, I love photographers. But...
You hate a bad photo?
Bad photos are just terrible.
Is it bad photo or the wrong photo? Sometimes both, presumably.
Probably both, sometimes. The photo must tell the same story as the writing, you know? And I remember once...
Because again, if you're selling the best widget in town, the reason you're selling them, great, but you cannot then just send a product shot of a widget, can you?
People think that. I'll say...
Oh, here's me widget. You're never going to get a photo of a widget in a paper.
It ain't going to happen. I'll give you an example. Many years ago, when I first started off, and before I used the professional photographer I use now, there was a guy who said he did PR and photography, and I was really busy, and I said, I'm doing something for a dog food factory. So will you will you go and take a photograph, right? And what he did was he stood miles away, so he got the factory in, and the people were that big. Whereas if he brought the people forward, so the factory's in the background, and maybe he's had some dog food product, it was awful. And that's one of the mistakes people make. Get the people in focus. It's all about people. And so good photography and contacts. Many a time I've had...
Sorry, Keith, before we put in there, because most people go, well, actually, I've read the papers for years, I've looked at the photos, I've got a photo, a story, I've got a headline which will hopefully get their attention. Where the hell do I send it? And you cannot just make that up, can you?
And no.
If you don't know people, you don't know people.
Nah. I mean, there are generic websites, email addresses for the public to use.
If you've got a story, send it in. But you're competing against thousands of people.
I tend to send it to individuals. You know, that you've built that relationship over with years. And I've had people coming to me and saying, "Well, I've wrote my own press releases." So, and I say, "Well, where have they appeared?"
I was going to say,
well, nowhere. So, you know, it's like
we get that. People do their own accounts, and I'm like, but they weren't very good.
I can drive this boat, but I can't fix it. So I bring somebody in to fix it. And if I try to fix an engine, it would cost me much more in the end of the day than actually getting a professional to do it. And that's why I use professional photography as well.
I suppose the moral is, let the business owner make the story,
Yeah.
and get someone to help you tell it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Exactly.
Well, that's a little strap line. We'll let you have that, Keith. But listen, I wished for a bit of shade earlier.
Well, you've got it.
We haven't been let down. My right arm and Keith's shoulder's soaking wet now, so we'll probably call it there. Thanks very much, Keith. I really appreciate your time. Where can people find you? You're all over. Highlights PR.
Highlights PR, yeah. Highlightspr.co.uk. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter at Highlights PR. Or you can ring us 07814 397 951.
Tell them that, yeah. So
The media train's kicking in again, you see. Yeah, you can get me on 07814 397 951. And I tell you what, please do come down, have a cup of tea on the boat. It's not too bad. It's all right, the tea.
well, the tea was canny. Yeah.
Please come along. There is no obligation, because I'd much rather you come, have a chat about your business, and if you don't want PR, you will tell somebody you've been on my boat, and that's how it works.
Most people in the north, I'm a typical lad from the northeast who doesn't get on a boat often, so I always like to come and see you, Keith. I hope you've got something from that. As always, please let us have some feedback in the comments. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe. It really does help the channel to grow. And also check out Keith on all of his social media channels.